The emergency klaxon's piercing wail cut through the pristine silence of the Galactic Council chambers like a blade through silk. Ambassador Mia Rodriguez felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she stood frozen before the massive holographic display, watching something that defied every law of physics she knew. A 12-kilometer warship was sliding through space with the fluid grace of a shark hunting in deep water. Its hull scarred and battle-worn, yet somehow beautiful in its terrifying purpose. "It's actually here," whispered Council Leader Olivia Parker, her normally commanding voice reduced to a trembling whisper. The elegant chamber, with its soaring crystalline walls and diplomatic seating arrangements designed for peaceful negotiations, suddenly felt like a mausoleum. Every alien delegate's face, from the blue-skinned Aquarians to the towering rock people, showed the same expression of pure, undiluted terror. The massive ship dominating the display was unlike anything in their extensive galactic databases. It wasn't sleek like the Vorthan vessels, or organic like the crystalline ships. This was something else entirely: brutal, angular, and covered in weapon emplacements that could crack planets like eggs. Its hull told stories of countless battles, yet it moved with the deadly precision of a predator that had never known defeat. "Where did it come from?" demanded General Theodore Walsh, his military uniform still crisp, despite the chaos erupting around them. His jaw was set in that familiar expression of grim determination, but his eyes, those steel-gray eyes that had seen 3 wars, betrayed the same terror everyone felt, crawling up their spine. "Unknown, sir," reported Lieutenant Emma Torres from her communications station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls with barely contained panic. "But Admiral, it's broadcasting something." The transmission crackled through the chamber's speakers with the clarity of a death sentence. The voice was calm, almost conversational, but carried an undertone that made everyone's blood run cold. "This is Admiral James Mitchell of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call." Mia's knees nearly buckled. The words hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible. We sent no distress call. And humans don't have ships like this." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the fear she was desperately trying to hide. "But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. You know how in those old movies the cavalry always arrives at the last second? Well, what if the cavalry had been watching you all along, just waiting for you to need them?" Admiral Emma's voice was barely a whisper now. "We're receiving similar reports from across the galaxy. Ships ... dozens of them ... appearing near every major system." The holographic display flickered and expanded, showing a 3-dimensional LDE map of local space that stretched across the chamber ceiling. Red dots began appearing like drops of blood on pristine white fabric: 1, then 10, then 50. Each dot represented a human warship that, according to everything they knew about human technology, shouldn't exist. "How many?" Theodore asked, his voice hollow as a tomb. "Conservative estimate?" 200 vessels, sir. All of them." Emma swallowed hard, the sound audible in the sudden silence. All of them broadcasting the same message. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Delegates were shouting orders in a dozen different languages, demanding explanations, calling for evacuation protocols. The Aquarian representative was clicking frantically in his native tongue, while the Rock People's ambassador was literally crumbling pieces of himself in stress, a sight that would have been amusing under any other circumstances. But underneath all the chaos, one terrible truth was becoming crystal clear. Settling over the assembled delegates like a shroud, humanity had been lying to them for decades. Think about it. How do you hide an entire fleet of warships from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy? How do you build weapons that can crack planets without anyone noticing? The answer was as brilliant as it was terrifying. You don't hide them. I tell everyone they're just stories. "Pull up the Human Entertainment Archives," Mia commanded, her diplomatic training finally overriding her terror. "Everything they've broadcast to us over the past 50 years. The holographic display shimmered, replacing the star map with a library of human transmissions. Movies, television shows, documentaries, all featuring impossible scenarios of human warriors fighting against overwhelming odds. Primitive humans with basic weapons somehow defeating advanced alien civilizations. Cities reduced to rubble, yet the humans kept fighting with improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics. We thought they were just stories, whispered the crystalline delegate, their translucent form flickering with distress patterns. Entertainment. Fiction. Look at the dates, Theodore said, his military mind already connecting the dots. These broadcasts started exactly 50 years ago, right after first contact. The implications hit the chamber like a tsunami. Every fictional broadcast, every entertainment program, every impossible scenario the humans had shared, they weren't stories at all. They were training manuals, documentaries, historical records of battles fought and won.
Oh.
They've been preparing us, Mia realized, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. Every movie, every show, every fictional scenarios, they were trying to teach us how to fight a war we didn't even know was coming. But fight what? Demanded the Aquarian representative, his gills fluttering with anxiety. The galaxy is at peace. There are no invasion fleets, no threats. That's when the second transmission arrived, a signal from deep space, beyond the galactic. RIM, in a language none of them recognized. The universal translator struggled with the alien syntax, but they caught enough to send chills through every delegate present. Final approach vector confirmed. Subjugation fleets en route. Resistance will be eliminated. Harvest protocols activated. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the sound of barely controlled breathing. Outside, through the crystalline walls, they could see the human warships taking positions around the system, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. They knew, Olivia whispered, her face pale as starlight. Somehow they knew this was coming. The holographic display showed Admiral Mitchell's face, a man who looked to be in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. War. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Council members have approximately 18 hours before the Devastator fleet reaches this system. We've been monitoring their approach for the past 6 months. It's been studying your weaknesses, learning your defensive capabilities, preparing for total subjugation. You knew? Theodore's voice was barely controlled fury. You knew and said nothing? Mitchell's expression didn't change. We've been trying to warn you for 50 years. Every broadcast, every story, every scenario we shared, they were all real. We showed you how to fight an impossible war, and you called them entertainment. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a physical presence. 50 years of warnings, dismissed as fiction. 50 years of preparation, laughed off as human imagination. What do you want from us? Mia asked, her diplomatic training taking over. Nothing, Mitchell replied. We're here to do what we've always done, protect our own. Unfortunately, that now includes you. The transmission ended, leaving them staring at empty space where the Admiral's face had been. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant hum of the human fleet positioning itself for battle. 18 hours, Theodore said into the silence. 18 hours, Mia repeated, and that's when she understood the true genius of what the humans had done. They hadn't just prepared for war, they'd prepared everyone else for it too, whether they knew it or not. Now here's the thing about preparation, it's like compound interest. Small efforts, made consistently over time, eventually create massive results. The humans had been making small deposits of knowledge, strategy, and tactics for 50 years. And now, when the galaxy needed it most, that preparation was about to pay the ultimate dividend. But that's a story for another time. If you want to understand how small, consistent actions can create extraordinary outcomes, check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding. You'll never look at your daily habits the same way again. Get me, Admiral Mitchell, Mia commanded, her diplomatic training finally kicking in despite the terror that was literally clawing at her throat like a living thing. Now, her voice carried the authority of someone who had negotiated peace treaties between warring species. But underneath it, everyone could hear the tremor of fear. The holographic display shimmered like water disturbed by a stone, and suddenly, They were looking at a human face that seemed carved from granite by an angry god. Admiral James Mitchell appeared to be in his 50s, with steel-gray hair that looked like it had been forged in the fires of battle, and eyes that had seen too much war, too much death, too much loss. Behind him, the bridge of his vessel hummed. With the deadly efficiency of a weapon designed for one-purpose destruction, "Council," he said, without preamble, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade through silk. "You have approximately 14 hours before the Devastator fleet reaches this system." "The aliens who've been hunting your galaxy for the past 3 centuries," Mitchell replied with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "They call themselves the Devastators, and they've been monitoring your communications, learning your weaknesses, mapping your defenses, and preparing for total subjugation. Think of them as cosmic exterminators, and you're the pest problem they're here to solve." The words hit the assembled delegates like physical blows. 3 centuries. They'd been watched, studied, cataloged like specimens in a laboratory for 300 years. General Walsh leaned forward, his anger finally overriding his fear. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. "You knew? You knew about this threat and said nothing?" Mitchell's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of emotion crossed that stone-carved face. "We've been trying to warn you for 50 years. Every fictional broadcast, every entertainment program we shared, they were all training scenarios. Real battles. Real tactics. Real blood spilled on real battlefields. Showed you how to fight an impossible war, and you laughed, because they were stories," Mia shouted, her diplomatic composure finally cracking like ice under pressure. "Fantasy. Scenarios. Science fiction entertainment." Her voice echoed off the crystalline walls, amplified by the chamber's acoustics until it sounded like the cry of a wounded animal. "No," Mitchell said quietly, but his quiet voice somehow carried more weight than all their shouting. "They were documentaries. Earth has been fighting the Devastators for over a century. We're the survivors of a war you didn't even know was happening. Now, here's where it gets really wild. Imagine fighting a war for 100 years and never telling your neighbors. It's like having a zombie apocalypse in your backyard while your neighbors think you're just really into special effects makeup." The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the sound of barely controlled breathing. Have heard a pin drop, if pins made any sound in the vacuum of space.
"How many?"
Theodore asked, his military mind already calculating odds, probabilities, chances of survival. "How many what?" Mitchell's eyes focused on the general like targeting. "Lasers. How many ships in their fleet?" Mitchell's pause was answer enough. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before he spoke. "Conservative estimate, 8,000 vessels, one capable of sterilizing a planet, each one carrying enough firepower to turn your homeworlds into cosmic dust." Emma Torres made a sound that might have been a sob, or might have been a laugh, the kind of sound people make when their minds can't quite process what they're hearing. "We don't have 8,000 ships in our entire combined fleet. Hell, we don't have 800 ships." "No," Mitchell agreed with the patience of a teacher explaining basic math to confused students. "You don't, but we do." The display changed, showing the outer rim of the galaxy where space itself seemed to be moving. Hundreds of ships were gliding, in precise formation, their hulls gleaming with the brutal efficiency of vessels designed for one purpose: war. These weren't exploration ships or trade vessels. These were weapons, pure and simple, each one a monument to human engineering and human determination. "Where did they come from?" Olivia whispered, her voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for witnessing miracles or disasters. "We've been building them for 200 years, Mitchell replied matter-of-factly. "Hidden shipyards and dead systems where no one looks. Mining operations in sectors you've never explored. Research. Stations in the void between galaxies. We've been preparing for this war while you've been enjoying peace, prosperity, and the luxury of thinking the universe was a safe place. Think about that for a moment. 200 years of secret preparation. That's like your quiet neighbor secretly building a tank in their garage for 2 centuries, while you thought they were just really into woodworking." The Aquarian delegates' gills were fluttering so rapidly, they looked like hummingbird wings. but the resources, the manpower, the technology required. We're very good at making do with what we have, Mitchell said with what might have been the ghost of a smile. And we've had a lot of practice at being underestimated. Something cold settled in her stomach, like swallowing liquid nitrogen. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy had been focused on trade routes and diplomatic protocols, humanity had been waging a shadow war across the cosmos. What do you want from us? Nothing, Mitchell said, and somehow that single word was more terrifying than any demand could have been. We're here to do what we've always done, protect our own. Unfortunately, that now includes you.
The crystalline.
Delegate's form flickered with confusion patterns. Fortunately, because, Mitchell continued, protecting you means revealing capabilities we've kept secret for 2 centuries. It means showing our hand to enemies who are still out there, watching, learning, adapting. It means starting a war we hoped we'd never have to fight in the open. The Rock People's ambassador crumbled a piece of himself in what passed for nervous laughter among his species. You're saying we're a liability? I'm saying you're family now, Mitchell replied. And family protects. Family, even when it's inconvenient. The transmission flickered, and for a moment, they caught a glimpse of the bridge behind Mitchell. Human officers moved with practiced efficiency, their faces calm despite the approaching storm. These weren't people preparing for their first battle, these were veterans, and that realization sent chills down every delegate's spine. Admiral Mia said, forcing her voice to remain steady, "What are our chances?" Mitchell studied her for a long moment. Against 8,000 Devastator ships. With your current fleet capabilities? He paused. 0. The word hit the chamber like a death sentence. But, he continued, with our combined forces, utilizing strategies we've perfected over a century of warfare, implementing tactics you've dismissed as fiction, double quotes. Another pause. Better than 0. The transmission ended, leaving them staring at empty space where the Admiral's face had been. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that comes before earthquakes, before tsunamis, before the world changes forever. 14 hours, Theodore said into the silence, his voice hollow as a tomb. 14 hours, Mia repeated, and that's when she understood the true magnitude of what was about to happen. In 14 hours, the galaxy would either stand united against an ancient threat, or it would fall to an enemy that had been planning their destruction for 3 centuries. She began issuing orders that would change the galaxy forever, each command carrying the weight of billions of lives. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought kept echoing. Humanity had been playing the long game for 200 years. And now it was time to see if their strategy would pay off. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. You want to understand how long-term thinking and consistent action can create extraordinary results, even when the odds seem impossible. Check out our next video about the power of compounding. You'll discover how small, consistent efforts can create massive outcomes that seem like magic to everyone else. The Devastator fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts descending on a wheat field. But these locusts were the size of cities and hungry for the complete annihilation of every living thing in the galaxy. Each ship was a monument to destruction, organic curves that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns like the heartbeat of some cosmic nightmare. Weapons that could turn entire star systems into nothing more than cosmic dust floating in the void. Fleet strength confirmed, reported Lieutenant Lucas Anderson from the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable. His voice steady, despite the fact that he was staring at the largest invasion force in recorded galactic history. 200 vessels. They're not slowing down, sir. Not even a little bit. Admiral Mitchell stood at the center of the bridge like a statue carved from granite, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose that had become legendary among his crew. Around him, men and women worked with the calm efficiency of people who had done this before many times. Their movements were precise, practiced, almost choreographed. These weren't rookies facing their first battle. These were veterans of a war the galaxy didn't even know was happening. Sir called out Commander Sofia Martinez from the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls that would have seemed like magic to most civilizations. They're hailing us. Put them through, Mitchell replied. his voice carrying the weight of a man who had heard this speech before. The alien voice that filled the bridge was like grinding metal given speech, like the sound of a planet dying in slow motion. Species, you will surrender immediately or face extinction. Your resistance is futile. Prepare for subjugation. Now, here's the thing about bullies. They always expect their victims to cower. They've got their little speech memorized, their intimidation, tactics perfected. But what happens when the victim has been preparing for this exact moment for over a century? Mitchell smiled a cold expression that his crew had learned to fear more than enemy weapons. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized his prey had walked into a trap. Tell them we received their message. Tell them we have a message in return. The what? Olivia's voice was barely audible, a whisper that somehow carried across the vast chamber. Her face had gone pale as moonlight, and her hands were trembling against the smooth surface of her diplomatic podium. What message, sir? Lucas asked, though from the look on his face, he already knew the answer. Come and take it. The first engagement happened in the outer system, where Earth's defense platforms had been waiting in silent readiness like sleeping giants. The Devastators approached in perfect formation, their massive vessels bristling with weapons that could crack moons like eggshells. Confident in their overwhelming superiority, they never saw the mines coming. The space between the planets suddenly erupted in fire and fury as gravitational weapons tore holes in reality itself. These weren't your grandfather's naval mines. These were weapons that bent space-time, created miniature black holes, and turned the very fabric of the universe into a weapon. The Devastator Vanguard ran headlong into a trap that had been 2 centuries in the making, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos as ships the size of Manhattan were torn apart by forces that shouldn't exist. Direct hit on their command ship, reported Sophia, her voice tight with excitement and disbelief. Multiple hull breaches. Energy readings are dropping across their entire front line. They're actually retreating, Mitchell said, calmly, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. They're regrouping. This is when it gets interesting. And he was right. The Devastator fleet reformed with the mechanical precision of a machine, but their perfect formation was broken. Gaps appeared in their lines, gaps that human ships poured through like wolves attacking a wounded deer, striking fast and fading. Away before the enemy could respond. All units, implement Pattern 7, Mitchell commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge's communication systems to reach every human ship in the fleet. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. The human ships suddenly scattered, breaking formation in what appeared to be complete chaos, total panic, a rout. But it wasn't chaos, it was choreographed destruction, a dance of death. That had been rehearsed in simulation after simulation. Small groups of vessels struck at weak points with surgical precision, faded away when the enemy turned to engage, coordinated their attacks with a precision that spoke of decades of practice. Think about it. While other species were perfecting their diplomatic protocols, humans were perfecting the art of war. While others were building trade routes, humans were building kill zones. They're using guerrilla tactics, whispered General Walsh from the Council observation deck, his voice filled with awe and terror. In space. They're actually using guerrilla tactics in a fleet engagement. They're not just using them, Mia replied, watching the tactical display with growing amazement as human ships seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. They're perfecting them. Look at that coordination. Look at that precision. The battle unfolded like a masterpiece of military strategy. Human ships would appear from nowhere, strike with devastating effectiveness, and vanish before the Devastators could bring their superior firepower to bear. It was like watching a heavyweight boxer being taken down by a swarm of hornets each. Individual sting wasn't enough to kill, but together they were overwhelming. The Devastators, for all their technological superiority, were fighting according to conventional tactics. They expected their enemies to engage in traditional fleet actions, to fight with honor and follow established rules of engagement. They expected a fair fight. Humans had never been much for fair fights. Enemy formation is collapsing, reported Lieutenant Anderson, his voice filled with something approaching wonder. Their command structure is breaking down. They're trying to retreat to a defensive posture. Negative, Mitchell replied, his smile growing wider. All units implement Thermopylae Protocol. Time to show them what happens when you threaten Earth. Human ships suddenly changed tactics again, forming a narrow corridor of interlocking fire. The Devastators, seeing what appeared to be a retreat, poured through the gap like water through a funnel. That's when the humans sprung their second trap. The retreating ships suddenly reversed course, turning the corridor into a killing field. Devastator vessels found themselves trapped in a crossfire that tore through their hulls like tissue paper. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were now floating debris, their crews either dead or desperately trying to abandon ship. The battle raged for 6 hours, 6 hours of the most intense combat the galaxy had ever witnessed. When it ended, the Devastator fleet was retreating, their formation shattered, their command structure in ruins, their confidence broken. Behind them, the human fleet maintained pursuit, their ships scarred but functional, their crews grim but victorious. "It's impossible," breathed Olivia Parker from the council chambers, her voice filled with awe. They did it. They actually did it. They defeated an invasion force that outnumbered them 4-1. Not just defeated, Theodore added, studying the tactical readouts. They destroyed them, systematically, methodically, like they were following a playbook. But on the flagship's bridge, Admiral Mitchell wasn't celebrating. He was studying the tactical readouts with the expression of a man who knew the real war was just beginning. His crew watched him, waiting for orders, waiting for the celebration that never came, sir? Lucas asked hesitantly. Orders. Should we stand down? Mitchell's response sent chills through every person who heard it. Prepare for the next wave. That was just their advance guard. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If that overwhelming force 8,000 ships capable of destroying planets was just the advance guard, what was coming next? But here's the thing about preparation and long-term thinking. It creates results that seem impossible to everyone else. The humans have been playing the ultimate long game, and now we're seeing the payoff. If you want to understand how consistent, strategic thinking can create extraordinary outcomes in your own life, check out our next video about the power of compounding. You'll never look at small daily actions the same way again. The second Devastator fleet was 3 times the size of the first. And when 24,000 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, the very fabric of space seemed to bend under their collective weight. Their hulls gleamed with the promise of total annihilation, each vessel a testament to a technology so advanced it made the galaxy's greatest achievements look like children's toys. "Holy God," whispered Commander Martinez, her voice barely audible above the bridge's humming electronics. Her face had gone pale as she stared at the tactical display showing wave after wave of enemy vessels. How are we supposed to fight that? It's like trying to stop an ocean with a coffee cup. Admiral Mitchell stood at the center of the bridge, his face carved from stone, unmoved by the overwhelming odds staring them down. 2 centuries of preparation had led to this moment, and he wasn't about to let fear derail everything humanity had worked toward. "The same way we've always fought," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "With everything we have." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady beeping of sensor arrays and the quiet hum of life support systems. Officer, every technician, every soul on that ship understood they were witnessing history in the making, either the greatest victory in human history or their final moments. "All human vessels. This is Admiral Mitchell," he announced over the fleet communication system, his words carrying across space to reach thousands of ships scattered throughout the system. "Today we make our stand. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human." The response was immediate and thunderous, thousands of voices acknowledging the order, each one carrying the weight of 2 centuries of preparation, generations of sacrifice, and the hopes of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dared to dream. "They're not just ships," Mitchell said to his bridge crew, his voice filled with quiet pride. "They're not just weapons floating in the void. They're the sum total of human ingenuity, human determination, and our absolute refusal to go quietly into the night." You know what's fascinating about humans? We're the only species that looks at impossible odds and thinks challenge accepted. While other civilizations calculate probabilities and retreat when the math doesn't work out, humans tend to grab the calculator and beat the problem to death with it. The battle began at the edge of the system, where human ships had seeded the space with every dirty trick they'd learned in 200 years of warfare. Gravitational mines that tore holes in space-time itself. Stealth vessels designed to look like debris until they turned into kinetic missiles. Weapons that used the enemy's own technology against them, turning their strengths into weaknesses. The space between planets erupted into a light show that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifyingly deadly. Energy beams that could slice through asteroids carved paths through the darkness while explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. Across the cosmic battlefield, "Sir," reported Lieutenant Noah Williams from the communications station, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "We're receiving transmission from the Devastator command ship." "Put it through," Mitchell commanded, curious to hear what the enemy had to say now that they'd gotten a taste of human warfare. The alien voice was different this time. Less confident, or cautious, like a bully who had just realized the victim might actually fight back. "Human fleet. Fight well, but you cannot win. The mathematics are against you. Surrender now, and we will make your death swift." Mitchell's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. "What ell them we have a counteroffer?" "What counteroffer, sir?" Williams asked, though from the Admiral's expression he could probably guess. "Tell them to go to hell." The second phase of the battle was brutal beyond description. The Devastators, learning from their first humiliating defeat, had adapted their tactics. They fought with the coordinated precision of a hive mind, their weapons carving through space with deadly efficiency. Their formations tighter than anything the galaxy had ever seen. But humans had learned something the Devastators never could. How to fight dirty, how to break rules that didn't even exist yet. How to turn disadvantages into advantages through sheer bloody-minded creativity. "All units, implement the Thermopylae Protocol," Mitchell commanded, his voice cutting through the battle communications like a sword through silk. "Sir." Martinez looked confused, her tactical training telling her this was insanity. "That's a suicide run. We'll lose half the fleet." "No," Mitchell corrected, his eyes never leaving the tactical display where thousands of ships danced their deadly ballet. "It's a victory run. Trust me."
Yes.
After 200 years of preparation, after countless simulations and endless training, it all came down to trust. Trust in the plan, trust in the crew, trust in the idea that sometimes the craziest strategy is the only one that works. The human ships suddenly broke formation. But instead of scattering like frightened birds, they formed a narrow corridor of interlocking fire. The Devastators, seeing what appeared to be a panicked retreat, poured through the gap, like water through a broken dam. That's when the humans sprung their trap. The retreating ship suddenly reversed course with a precision that would have been impossible without perfect coordination, turning the corridor into a killing field. Devastator vessels found themselves trapped in a crossfire that tore through their hulls like tissue paper. Their superior technology, useless against tactics they had never encountered. "It's working," Sophia reported, her voice filled with amazement. In disbelief, they're actually falling back. "The entire front line is in retreat." "No," Mitchell said, studying the tactical display with the cold calculation of a chess master planning 20 moves ahead. "They're not falling back. They're learning," and he was right. The Devastator fleet suddenly stopped their retreat, their formation tightening into a defensive sphere that would have impressed military tacticians across the galaxy. They'd realized the human tactics and were adapting faster than anyone thought possible. "Sir," Lucas called out, his voice tight with urgency, "they're powering up their planet killers. All of them. Energy signatures are off the charts." Nodded grimly, as if he'd been expecting this moment for decades. "Then it's time for the final gambit." He opened a channel to the entire human fleet, his words about to echo across history. "All vessels, this is Admiral Mitchell.
Execute protocol.
Omega. Repeat. Execute protocol, Omega." The response was immediate and terrifying. Every human ship in the fleet suddenly accelerated to maximum speed. their courses converging on the Devastator formation like arrows shot from the same bow. They're ramming, General Walsh breathed from the observation deck, his military mind, struggling to process what he was seeing. Every single ship is ramming. It's a mass suicide attack. No, Mia said, understanding, dawning on her face like sunrise after the longest night. They're delivering something. The human ships struck the Devastator formation like bullets fired from the guns of gods. But instead of exploding in balls of fire, they punched through the alien hulls with surgical precision and released their payloads boarding parties equipped with weapons specifically designed to fight inside enemy vessels. You see, Mitchell said calmly, as his own ship shuddered from impact, debris raining against the hull like deadly hail. We learned something important from our fictional scenarios. Sometimes the best way to kill a monster is from the inside. The battle turned into a nightmare for the Devastators. Their own ships became weapons turned against them as human boarding parties seized control of vessel after vessel, turning the enemy's strength into their weakness, their numbers into their downfall. When it was over, the space around the system was littered with the wreckage of the Devastator fleet, and at the center of it all, the human fleet reformed, battered but victorious, scarred but unbroken. All Devastator vessels have been destroyed or captured, reported Lieutenant Anderson, his voice filled with awe. Sir, we did it. We actually did it. Mitchell nodded, but his expression remained grim. Signaled the council. Tell them the immediate threat is over. But tell them this isn't the end. This is just the beginning. Because that's the thing about long-term thinking and preparation. Doesn't just solve today's problems. It prepares you for tomorrow's challenges. If you want to understand how consistent, strategic action can create seemingly impossible results in your own life, check out our next video about the power of compounding where small daily actions create extraordinary outcomes. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened in a chamber that had been completely rebuilt from the ground up. And the transformation was nothing short of revolutionary. The old circular design with its elegant curves and diplomatic seating arrangements, designed for peaceful negotiations, had been replaced with something that looked like it belonged on the bridge of a warship. It's a command center that could coordinate defense efforts across the galaxy, bristling with tactical displays, communication arrays, and enough computing power to run a small star system. Admiral Mitchell stood before the assembled delegates. But everything had changed. The dynamic, the energy, the very air in the room felt different. Where once humans had been dismissed as primitive upstarts, barely worth acknowledging, now they were regarded with the kind of respect usually reserved for gods or the people who had literally saved civilization itself, because that's exactly what they'd done. The threat isn't over, Mitchell said without preamble. It's cutting straight to the heart of the matter, like a surgeon with a laser scalpel. His words hit the chamber with the force of a gravitational weapon. That the fleets we defeated were only the advanced forces. The main Devastator invasion will come within the next 2 years. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, if pins made any sound in the vacuum of space. Every delegate, every advisor, every observer felt their blood turn to ice water in their veins. Ambassador Mia Rodriguez leaned forward, her diplomatic training overriding the terror that was trying to claw its way up her throat. Need from us. It's everything, Mitchell replied, and somehow that single word carried more weight than entire treaties. Your species have capabilities we lack. The Aquarian's quantum communication networks that can send messages faster than light. Itself, the crystalline collective's energy manipulation technology that can bend the laws of physics. The rock people's mineral synthesis abilities that can create materials stronger than neutron star cores. We need full integration. Think about it for a moment. Imagine if every human skill, every bit of knowledge, every advantage we've developed over millennia suddenly became available to solve one massive problem. That's what Mitchell was proposing, but on a galactic scale. And in return, asked General Walsh, his military mind already calculating the strategic implications of such an alliance. We teach you what we've learned about fighting impossible odds, Mitchell said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 centuries of hard-earned experience. We share our ship designs, our tactics, our strategies. We show you how to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, how to make your weaknesses into strengths, how to win wars that everyone says you can't win. Olivia Parker studied the star charts displayed around the chamber, her eyes tracing the routes that had once been peaceful trade corridors and were now potential invasion paths. The documentaries you showed us, they weren't predictions about what might happen. They were templates for what we needed to learn. Exactly, Mitchell confirmed, and for the first time since this whole crisis began, there was something approaching satisfaction in his voice. Humanity has faced extinction multiple times throughout our history. We've learned that survival isn't about fighting fair or following rules that your enemy doesn't respect. It's about fighting to win, period. What about after? Asked Commander Martinez, who had been promoted to liaison between the human fleet and the Council, basically the person responsible for translating human crazy into galactic policy. After we've learned to fight like humans, what happens to our civilization? What happens to who we are? Mitchell's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, the stone-faced admiral looked almost human. Then we'll have something worth fighting for. A galaxy that can defend itself. It's a civilization that can't be conquered by anyone or anything, because it's learned the most important lesson in the universe. Which is, Mia asked, that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And the best offense is being so prepared that your enemies think twice before starting a fight. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine if your entire neighborhood suddenly decided to learn martial arts because one family had been secretly training for decades. That's essentially what happened next. The vote was unanimous. Not a single dissenting voice, not one abstention, not even a request for more time to think it over. The Galactic Defense Initiative was established with Admiral Mitchell as its first commander. And the transformation that followed was nothing short of miraculous. Over the following months, alien species that had known only peace for centuries began learning the harsh lessons of warfare. Human instructors, battle-tested veterans who had been fighting the Devastators for generations, taught them guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, and the art of turning every resource into a weapon. The Aquarians learned to use their quantum communication networks to coordinate surprise attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. The Crystalline Collective discovered how to weaponize their energy manipulation abilities, turning their gift for peaceful applications into tools of devastating warfare. The Rock People began forging armor that could withstand planet-killer weapons. Their mineral synthesis abilities, creating materials that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics, but perhaps most importantly, they learned something else, something that couldn't be taught in tactical manuals or strategy sessions, something that couldn't be programmed into computers or learned from simulations. They learned hope, real hope. The kind of hope that comes from knowing you're not helpless, that you can fight back, that you can win even when the odds are stacked against you. It's the difference between being a victim and being a survivor, Admiral Mitchell said to Mia Rodriguez as they watched the first mixed species crew board a new class of warship, a vessel that combined human tactical design with alien technology in ways that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. We really did think they were just stories once, just entertainment, just fiction. Now, Mia asked, watching as an Aquarian officer worked alongside a human engineer to calibrate weapon systems that could punch holes through reality itself. Mitchell's smile was genuine for the first time since she'd known him, transforming his battle-scarred face into something almost peaceful. Now we're writing our own story, and this time we're going to write a happy ending. In the depths of space, human ships continued their patrol routes, but now they weren't alone. Alien vessels flew alongside them, their crews trained in tactics that had once been dismissed as fiction, their ships equipped with weapons that combined the best of every galactic civilization. The galaxy was learning to fight like humans, and humans were learning to hope like never before. The next invasion was coming, everyone knew it, everyone was preparing for it. But this time, they would be ready. This time the galaxy would not fall. This time they would win. And that's the power of long-term thinking, preparation, and compound effort. Small actions, taken consistently over time, create results that seem impossible to everyone else. If you want to discover how this principle can transform your own life, check out our next video about the power of compounding. You'll never look at daily habits the same way again.